Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, confronting sexual harassment on Japan's public transport. A government survey finding 1 in 10 young women have been groped on trains, highlighting an often unreported crime that's long plagued the country. Also, what happens when you gender flip the tale of Moby Dick? I'll be talking shortly to British-Chinese author Xiaolu Guo, who's done just that with her latest novel. And in Kenya, a new wave of authors, illustrators and media creators who are challenging the way young girls see themselves and their futures. But first, sexual harassment is recognised as being a major problem on Japan's public transport. According to the first government survey on the issue, 1 in 10 women aged under 30 say that they've been touched inappropriately on trains. Yet, as our team in Tokyo report, the figure is probably far higher, as many women fear the consequences of reporting incidents to the police.
This Japanese YouTuber is on a mission. 4 times a week, he takes the Tokyo subway and, using his eyes and smartphone, attempts to catch men in the act of groping female passengers.
When the train arrives, some passengers get off while others get on. That's when gropers take advantage of the situation to touch women.
Funaimu says this subway station is notorious as it's served by several lines. He waits, biding his time, and then he spots something.
That guy looks suspicious. His movements are strange. He's rocking back and forth, and it seems like he's looking for something.
We follow Funaimu from a discreet distance. He spots another person acting suspiciously. The man appears to be taking advantage of the pushing and shoving to grope a woman in a white skirt. The suspect ignores him and attempts to board the train again, but Funaimu isn't giving up. The man apologizes when the police arrive. He's given a warning and goes on his way. About 800 people are arrested for groping, known as chikan, in Tokyo every year. But many perpetrators get away with their crimes. Japanese society can react negatively to women who speak out, so many victims are too afraid to confront their assailants. A government survey found that 80% of sexual assault victims do not report it to the police. But this woman, whom we'll call Mami, decided to go public. In the 15 years Mami has lived in Tokyo, she's twice been groped on the train.
The first time, an old man was standing next to me, started saying obscene things to me. He also touched my buttocks. The second time, someone touched my breasts for about 15 minutes. I waited before reacting because, in Japan, women are often accused of making false allegations, and I didn't want to be accused of that.
With the help of 2 passengers, Mami took the man to the police station and filed a complaint.
I was often asked if I felt ashamed, but no, I was never ashamed. On the contrary, the harasser should be ashamed.
This expert believes that sexual assaults on public transport in Japan reflect a desire among some men to dominate women.
By subjecting a woman to harassment, some men feel a sense of power or excitement. It can even become a form of addiction. For some men, the thrill of harassment is, in a way, unforgettable.
In response, authorities are stepping up efforts to protect women from sexual predators. Many train and subway companies in Tokyo and other cities operate women-only carriages. And this year, 3,000 additional police officers will be deployed to ensure passengers can travel in safety.
Now, it's a literary classic that adorns many bookshelves across the globe. I'm talking about Moby Dick, a story centred on the violence of whaling and told with a very masculine perspective. But what happens when an author decides to retell it from a feminist point of view? British-Chinese author Xiaolu Guo has done just that with her latest novel, Call Me Ishmaelle. She joins me now from London. Xiaolu, thank you so much for your time. To begin with, what drew you to the book?
I think for me, someone who grew up in China, I lived in China for 30 years and came to the West. For the last 20 years, I was thinking about how should I engage with Western literature, especially Western classical work like Moby Dick. And Moby Dick was one of the most fantastic, but most difficult lyric text I think you can imagine, from East Asia. And since I was writing in English for the last 20 years, and I thought about the way to engage with Western literature. And when I was reading very closely Melville's Moby Dick, and I thought, this is old man ship. What if there's women on the ship? would the story change? And also, I thought about the violence between man and the whale. I thought about whether the violence will be the only way to be manifested on the ship, on the ocean. Would there be other ways? So that was, the beginning of my sort of rewriting or retelling.
So how much of a challenge was it to rewrite the story and making Ishmaelle the sailor become a girl in disguise?
It's really difficult. I think it's a mad and an interesting and a wild project for me. I think not only, one thing, of course, a young sailor, a woman in disguise on a whaler, it's amongst 39 or 40 men, how should I convey her story, the whole, I think the half of the book, kind of, she's hidden, completely hidden her sexuality, her gender. But then on the other hand, I think the difficulty is dealing with the original text. I think the very strong biblical Shakespearean prose, and I think for me is a way to, how do I translate that into Eastern kind of, with Eastern Asian reference, which means, I translate Christianity into Taoism or Buddhism. How should I bring the Eastern Asian sailors and whalers onto that ship? I think that's the most difficult part, perhaps, beyond the nautical knowledge, really.
How much of your own background as a migrant to Britain attracted you to the character of Ishmaelle, who effectively is the outsider in this story?
Sure, that's a really good question. I find, being an outsider in the West, being an Eastern Asian writer in the Western world, especially in Europe, is kind of, it's almost another kind of subtext for me to reimagine, a young girl on a man-only whaler. And then this is set in the 1860, during the American Civil War. Of course, I think it's a very remote historical period, but on the other hand, how an outsider, try to become an insider, try to engage with local history and to become one of the locals. I think that's something sort of, it's almost like psychological study for me, and so the whole writing process is almost very personal and pressing, but also very much research-based. I would say this is one of the most difficult projects I have went through, yeah.
And of course, Ishmaelle bonds with the mythical white whale Moby Dick. So there's a connection in your story between the young woman and nature, effectively.
Sure. The one thing I really wanted to, I wouldn't say rewrite, but retell, it's a relationship between the nature. What I meant is the whale, really the white whale, the Moby Dick in the original Melville's novel, and the relationship to the sailors, I think, to the whalers. In the original novel, in Melville's version, it's really a bloody battle, constant battles for 400 pages. But I think in my version, the young female whaler, Ishmaelle, rather than Ishmaelle, she developed this very special kind of connection with the creature, with the whale. So there's kind of secret communication, under the sea or beyond the sea or above the sea between she and the whale. And that's something I really try to convey, the secret message is something to do with femininity, is to do with the deep understanding of our relationship to the nature, to the ocean, to the whale, or is there something else beyond human control? And that's something really took me, 300 pages to think through, to write about.
Xiaolu, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Next to Kenya, where male-led narratives have long dominated bookshelves and screens. But now there's a new wave of Kenyan authors, illustrators and media creators who are reshaping the way young girls see themselves and their futures. Olivia Bizzo has more.
A show that has an African girl as its lead is not something people are used to seeing. Behind this series is a Kenyan team who's inspiring the next generation of women who, like Super Sema, will be able to use science, technology, engineering and maths to solve the world's biggest problems.
Growing up, I didn't really see characters who looked like me, sounded like me, or represented the reality that I'm from. So just to have Sema as the center of a STEM world is showing girls that they can be engineers, innovators, technology.
Books are also shedding light on young Kenyan girls. This story educates children about consent. The author is working to expand access in underprivileged areas, offering young readers characters that they can relate to.
There wasn't, any literature that specifically spoke about body autonomy written by a Kenyan, published here or printed here. And so it was very, very important to me to uplift the stories by us, for us.
Local feminist organizations are working to ensure that these stories contribute to a larger cultural shift.
We decided to come up with this segment, We Are Feminist Kids, so that we can start having age-appropriate feminist conversations with children to help them understand and to give them language around certain issues.
Last year, Kenya recorded about 170 femicide cases. The hope is that educating future generations will help break the taboo around this violence.
And that's it for this edition, so until our next show, bye for now.